Hey everyone, my name is Jason Keesaw, and I'd like to welcome you to Executing Strategy at the Frontline, part of our free 30-minute webinar series here at Merit Senior Living. My role here at Merit is Training and Development Manager, and what I do is I work with senior living communities all across the country and help them define their training strategy really in three areas of leadership development, hospitality and service, and workplace communications. We found that those three areas play a significant role in the success of a community and ultimately the community reaching its goals and the residents being satisfied and the leadership and frontline employees meeting the residents' expectations. Today we're going to be talking about, when we talk about executing strategy from the front line, we're going to look at priorities. So we're going to be pinpointing priorities. We're going to be talking about a few different areas that contribute to execution, and that would be focus, measurement, and accountability. And we're going to do a little piece at the end, just a brief question of reflection on how, what do we need to do once we're off this call to execute more effectively, so to speak. The three elements of execution are, as I mentioned, focus, measurement, and accountability. With focus, it's all about prioritization. It's all about, as Stephen Covey said it, putting first things first. Making sure that we're doing what we need to be doing to accomplish the bigger organizational and community goals. Well, once we know what our priorities are, we need to measure them. I used to have a manager that said you cannot manage what you can't measure. And you absolutely need to be able to measure or manage results. And the key to managing results and goals is to make sure you're measuring it. So we want to make sure we are tracking progress and assessing the outcomes. And the only way any of this is going to happen is through accountability. So assign work and reinforce responsibility. And that's figuring out ways to hold ourselves accountable. That's figuring out ways to hold our staff accountable. And that's figuring out ways to hold anybody involved in the execution and outcome of whatever it is we're trying to achieve, holding them accountable. So this is going to be a theme that we're going to talk about throughout this webinar, is this the focus, measurement, and accountability. A couple statistics here. 3% of executives say that their companies are very successful at executing strategies. 3%. 62% say their companies are only moderately successful or worse at strategy execution. And these stats make a lot of sense to me. In my former life, and well, as I work with leaders now within the senior living space, and in my former life as a business coach, it was very interesting working with business owners and leaders, because you have a couple different types of personalities, and you've got people that are very, very much of a visionary, very big picture. They see opportunity. They don't let details of the unknown hold them back. They're wonderful at painting the picture on what the world can be like. Then you've got other people that are not as good at that, but they're really good at getting things done. Okay. Now, sometimes you'll come across visionaries who are really good at getting things done, and sometimes you'll come across people that are really good at getting things done, and they have some strategic ability or visionary to them. But it is a different mindset in my book, and those of us who aspire to be leaders in whatever industry we're in, and in the senior living space, it's best that we're able to do both. We need to understand strategic thinking, and we need to understand big picture goals and why it's important that we reach them. And then we also need to be able to drill down and identify activities and measure the activities that are going to help us accomplish the goal, and of course hold us accountable. So that's our goal here. We want to raise this 3% higher, to where more organizations and more senior living communities are able to say that they are very successful at executing strategies. So when we're talking about focus and we're talking about executing, we need to figure out what the heck we're going after. Okay? So we really want to pinpoint our priorities. So just take a moment and think about your top 3 priorities. You'll see this little grid that I've laid out here in the left column. It asks, what are my top 3 priorities? Ignore the middle column for right now. But on the right column, it says, what organizational or departmental goals do my priorities support? Now, this is the difference between just doing things and doing things with purpose. Okay? The purpose is the organizational goals. It's the vision. It's the mission. It can even come down to departmental goals. But the point is, when we're thinking about our priorities, they need to be in line with bigger goals, bigger organizational strategic goals. Because in order for the strategic goals to be satisfied, there are a lot of lower level things that need to be made a priority, and that's really what this is about. Again, this is executing strategy from the front line. It's not only visionary. It's how do we take that and make sure it's happening at the lowest level of, in the most tactical level of our organization. So what are your top 3 priorities? And as you're thinking about that, are you able to attach your top 3 priorities to bigger organizational or departmental goals? Hopefully this is something that you will come back to, and you can look at it further. We are in the process of recording this webinar, so the link will be posted in the future for you to reference, and you can always send us an email and notify us for us to get you some of this information as well. So what are your top 3 priorities, and how do they help you accomplish bigger organizational and departmental goals? In the spirit of looking at focus, measurement, and accountability, take a moment to reflect on some things here. Take a moment to reflect on, when we're talking about specifically about focus, how well do you execute? And remember, execution is made up of focus, measurement, and accountability. So go ahead and take a moment and look at those 4 bullet points and see, answer the question honestly with yourself on how efficient you are at these things, how good you are, and what your opportunity is to improve. Is your time being invested in satisfying your most critical priorities? Are you active in sharing information with your team about the priorities, but also how they impact the organization? When you do get distracted, how quickly do you refocus? And are you proactive in looking at barriers? All of these things will contribute to us having more focus the better we get at them. Regarding measurement, how well do you execute? When we're looking at measurement, are you measuring the right things? And do you understand and do you know on when things have been achieved? Are you breaking your goals up into smaller milestones? You know, taking big goals and breaking them up into little chunks over the course of a time will help you and your team make sure you're measuring the right things and your actions are going in the right directions. Are there clear deadlines and definitions of success and what prioritization looks like? And is the measurement visible to the team? Do you just talk about results? Or are they a part of the journey in attaining the goals and satisfying the priorities and ultimately achieving organizational goals? So how well do you execute when it comes to measurement? Finally, accountability. How well do you execute with accountability? Take a moment to read those 4 bullet points. Are you making sure that the action needed to achieve the priorities is carried out by the appropriate team member? Are you monitoring progress and following up? Do you have procedures and processes in place? Whether it's positive or opportunities, are you providing coaching and feedback in order to help your team members make sure they're staying on course to achieve the priority? And are they aware of the consequences? Are they aware of the consequences to the team, whether they reach the goals or not, whether they satisfy the priority or not? And are they aware of how their role is impacting the overall organization? Clear communication in these areas can go a long way in not only motivating and engaging your employees, but making sure you're able to hold them accountable so that all the goals and priorities are achieved. Focus. Focus means devoting energy, attention, and time to what you have determined to be important. Now, all this is assuming, as we've gone through the process of pinpointing your priorities, that's determining what's important. Are you devoting the energy, attention, and time on what is truly important with your organization? Or are you spending your time in other areas? Just take a moment and go and look through this list of all the different places that your time can go throughout the day and throughout your week. And really the spirit of this question, the spirit of these bullet points right here are, sure, you can be providing expert opinion to others. Does it contribute to your priorities and the goals? You can be a team member and an individual contributor. Are your actions helping achieve priorities and the organizational goals? All these things can be a positive or a negative. It's all about where the time and energy is focused. We do a great job at spending a lot of time on things that don't matter. In order to execute our strategy at the most tactical level possible, we cannot be spending our time in areas that do not help achieve organizational goals and the organizational strategy. It just can't happen. So do you do things that are urgent but less important? And if you're able to acknowledge that and admit that to yourself, how can you counteract that tendency? Life is busy. Work is busy. How do you manage and how can you manage competing priorities? And in that spirit, how do you make the priorities more visible for yourself and your team? How do you make it live within your culture? How do you make it so it's relevant and visible all the time? So whenever your team members are, starting their days, they're able to acknowledge what it is they're doing and, in the big picture, what it is they're trying to accomplish. So going back to the first slide we looked at, one of the first slides, it was asking you to look at your top 3 priorities and making sure that those top 3 priorities were in alignment with your organizational goals. So as you think about those, assign a % probability of timely successful completion for each item. Because things have deadlines. And if we may accomplish them, and we may be doing the right actions, we may achieve the end result, but if it's not in the necessary time, are we really successful? You know, we can achieve it in the necessary time, but if we're not taking the right actions or we're not getting the result we need, is it really successful? We want to make sure we're paying attention to all those things. And when you're thinking about your priorities, what is on track and what is at risk? What is on track to reach the goals, and what is at risk not to? And again, when we're talking about risk, is it the activities not being done that are in alignment with priorities and the organizational goals? Is the vision not clearly defined so that everything below it can go in the right direction? Are we not measuring the results good enough to make sure that we're on track? Are we not holding people accountable enough? Are we not holding ourselves accountable enough? Which of your priorities can you say are on track, and which of your priorities can you say are at risk? Now, this is a bigger philosophical question on this, on what's on track and what's at risk. We're not going to get too much into the weeds here. I want you to think of your own goals and your own priorities, but hopefully you can, if anything, on a sheet of paper, write down track ? Risk ? So you can start to think about everything that you're trying to accomplish and what's really on track and what's really at risk. And all of it comes down to focus. If we focus in the right areas, everything else will fall into place. When we're focused on the right things, our ability to measure it will be better. Our ability to hold people accountable will be better. Our ability to communicate what we need to do will be better. But we need to sharpen our focus. Some ways to do that: know your community's department goals. Understand how your team supports those goals. Be aware of what's on track and what's at risk. Know how much time is spent on the priorities. Make them visible to the team. Anticipate potential concerns and barriers. Balance needs, such as demands for leadership, coaching, administration tasks, performance management. What is urgent and what's not urgent? How do you keep your focus on the urgent and important things in your priorities? So focus, big deal. When we're talking about measuring, we have two types of measurements. We're measuring performance and we're measuring results. Measuring performance and we're measuring results. When we're measuring performance, we're monitoring things and we're monitoring trends and we're tracking accomplishments and milestones during the course of achieving the priority. When we're talking about results, we know what success looks like, and we need to measure what you've achieved in relation to the desired outcome. And if we haven't achieved, what do we need to change? We want to make sure our metrics are good. So the metrics, our measurement, our measurements need to be objective. Now, they just need to be agreed upon. So if you have a leadership team and you're deciding to measure something, make sure you're measuring the same things. You don't want to be looking at different information and measuring different things unless you've agreed upon. Now, some things that you measure or look at measuring, some of them are going to be very tangible with a very clear outcome, and some of them will not be. Some of the things that will not be that I hear a lot about is resident satisfaction and employee engagement. You need to figure out a way to create a measurement for that. And once you figure out how to measure it, how do you keep that consistent? So, for example, the good metrics with this, they need to be objective. They need to be actionable. So you need to be able to do something with them, and you need to be able to get good information from it. Consistently trackable. If it's not easy to track what's being measured, it's not good enough. Easy to implement. Can't be rocket science. And it can't be on your shoulders as a leader all the time. You need to be able to do something that's easy to implement so that people can do that to make sure you're reaching the goals. Quantifiable. And this is where I was talking about that some things are tangible, some things are intangible. How do you make it quantifiable? How do you measure resident satisfaction so you can come to some kind of a result? How do you measure employee engagement? How do you measure quality? Sometimes we need to be creative and think outside of the box to create those processes. And is it relevant? Is it relevant? Is the information you're tracking relevant, and does it contribute to the bigger picture and what the organization is trying to accomplish? Does it help become better at hitting the priorities? Going back to a quote I also said at the beginning of what a manager used to say to me, you cannot manage what you can't measure. Perhaps what you measure is what you'll get. More likely, what you measure is all you'll get. Measurement is a key to achievement. You have to know where you're going, and you need to make sure that you are making progress toward that goal. So we've talked about focus, we've talked about measurement. Finally, is the last one is accountability, the last piece in executing strategy. And some best practices in accountability. Hold people accountable for each progress measure. You can have the measurement process in place, but if you don't have that assigned to anybody, what's the likelihood that it's going to be accomplished? Make sure you have the right people in the right place that are going to be handling this stuff. Another best practice, communicate accountability, including consequences. Tell them why it's great that the goals are going to be reached. Why are these things a priority, and how does it impact the organization? What does it mean to them? What does it mean to them and the community when the priorities are reached, and what are the consequences if they're not? Because there are consequences. Set up monitoring and follow-up methods. Again, we need to make sure we're on the right track. And part of that is when we set up our measurements, we need to follow up that with, okay, so we have our measurements in place. How are we making sure we're using the measurements to the greatest of their abilities? Set up monitoring and follow-up methods. And finally, while we're working with people, making sure that we're offering feedback and giving coaching. It's got to be a continuous conversation. This isn't about giving a vision, stating strategic objectives, and outlining goals and having people just go at it. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done in between the vision and the action being accomplished. And that's our responsibility as leaders to connect the dots with that, to make sure people are on board and to make sure they understand what's going on and to make sure that we are holding them accountable in that spirit. Accountability, the acceptance of responsibility for accomplishing work in support of a priority. We want to make sure we are giving our team members the opportunity to accept the responsibility. I was talking to a client last month, and this gentleman started working in the industry, I think, in the 1960s. And he said to me, he said, you know, back when I started, you told somebody what job to do, and if they didn't do it, you replaced them. And I'm glad that's not the way it is today. But that's an old school way of doing things. Today, we need to work with people differently. Our lines of communication needs to be different. There's all types of great research and studies out there and information out there on employee engagement and employee motivation, right? Part of it is autonomy. Part of it is meaningful work. Part of it is independence, you know, along with that autonomy. Give people the opportunity to accept the responsibility for it. Just don't tell them what needs to be done. Make it an ongoing conversation so that everybody is on the same page and everybody can reach their goal together. Just kind of a recap. We focused on 3 areas or 3 elements of execution. We focused on focus, making sure we're putting priorities first, making sure we're paying attention to the urgent and important things instead of other things that may appear urgent but are clearly not important. We want to make sure that when we are distracted, we're able to refocus quickly so that we can get back on course. Distractions are going to happen. Focus is something that is constantly challenged. We must be disciplined and focused in what we're trying to accomplish and the priorities that we're going after. We need to be able to measure our progress. So finding good ways to measure how we are doing in accomplishing the goal. Making sure we're breaking it down into pieces and different milestones so that we will know if we're on course. You know, one of it is to make sure we're on course. The other piece of it is to celebrate accomplishments when we reach them. Celebrate the accomplishments during the journey of reaching our strategic goals. Making sure our measurements are tangible. Even when they're not tangible, we want to figure out ways to make them tangible. And finally, we want to make sure there's accountability measurements in place to make sure that we're looking at the measurements and our focus is in the right areas, and ultimately, we reach our goals. So the 3 elements of execution that we've talked about today are focus, measurement, and accountability. I'll leave you with a final reflection question. After going through some of this information and digging more into the focus, measurement, and accountability, what is something you want to discuss with your manager? And what is something you want to discuss with your team? Maybe it's a need. Maybe it's something you need to discuss with your manager and something you need to discuss with your team. But the purpose of these webinars and really the trainings we facilitate in general, part of it outside of the educational aspect of it and introducing really great strategies to help you become more successful, it creates a conversation. It creates a conversation amongst frontline employees and leadership. It creates a conversation among leadership. It forces you to ask yourself questions and think about things that you would have never thought about unless you had somebody who was wearing the hat of holding your goals and your strategic objectives at priority. So what is something you need or want to talk to your manager about, and what is something you need or want to talk to your team about? Something that will gain clarity, that will give you more clarity in pursuit of accomplishing your priorities, satisfying those, and reaching your goals. This has been Executing Strategy at the Frontline. My name is Jason Keesaw, Training and Development Manager with Merit Senior Living. If you have any follow-up questions, please visit meritseniorliving.com, seniorlivingleadership.com, or you can send me an email right at my link at the bottom of the page. If you're interested in chatting more about this, you can go to the Merit Senior Living Facebook page where we've asked a couple of questions. One question is, how do you execute your leadership strategy at the front line? And number 2 is, how do you keep your team and yourself accountable? Thank you for your time today, and we hope you will join us for a future free 30-minute webinar. Thank you.